back around.
The January 9th, 2023 regular Wasilla City Council meeting is called to order. The time is 6 p.m. Before we begin, council, please put away cell phones. If you have personal business to attend to during the meeting, please move for a recess. If you are participating telephonically, please mute your phone unless speaking. Also, when speaking, please state your name for those streaming the meeting. As a reminder to all attendees, this meeting is being streamed live. The camera is located directly in the back of the council chambers above the clock. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Vlock.
Here.
Councilmember Rubio is absent and excused unless there's objection from the body. You do have a quorum, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, and Vlock are present. Councilmember Rubio is absent.
Thank you. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Representative Eastman, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item of business is approval of the agenda. And under item 5.2, under special orders of the day, MATCOM recognition of dispatcher Michele Lecours has been rescheduled to January the 23rd meeting due to unanticipated conflicts. Is there changes to the agenda?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham.
Madam Mayor, I would like to move item 8.2.5, which is ordinance serial 2305 to new business. I would also like to move items 8.4.1, which is AM 2242, and item 11.1.1, IM 2216 to new business.
Okay. Jamie, you got this? All right. Are there additional changes to the agenda? Is there objection? Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved as amended. We are now at special orders of the day. We have one proclamation which I will read. The City of Wasilla Proclamation recognizing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of equality and achieving social change have shaped our nation and inspired the world with a vision of dedication to freedom and equality. And whereas Dr. King became the voice of the American Civil Rights Movement, which resulted in landmark legislation known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And whereas Dr. King encouraged Americans to come together regardless of age, race, or creed to strengthen their communities, alleviate poverty, and value the dignity and respect inherent in all people. And whereas through his example, he taught the values of courage, truth, justice, compassion, dignity, humility, service, and brotherhood. And whereas we celebrate Dr. King's birthday and remember his legacy as an American hero and tireless social activist who called upon our nation to ensure equal justice under the law, upholding our founding principles which recognize individual rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas in communities throughout the state, Alaskans will join the millions of citizens across the nation who will honor and celebrate Dr. King's life and teachings, recognizing the needs and serving their communities. Now therefore I, Glenda D. Ledford, Mayor of the City of Wasilla, do hereby proclaim January 16th, 2023 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the City of Wasilla and encourage all Alaskans to act for the future betterment of our community. Dated this 9th day of January 2023. Okay, we are now at Commission and Agencies report. Our first one is Charting Wasilla's Economic Development Future McKinley Research Group.
thank you for having me here tonight to talk about the Wasilla Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies. And I promise I won't say comprehensive economic development strategies that many times throughout this because I know it's a mouthful. First, I wanted to just give a snapshot of briefly what I'll cover tonight. I'm going to introduce our firm to you and myself. We'll talk about what a SEDS is and what that process looks like. I'll give an update on the timeline and then talk about some next steps. So really briefly, pleased to introduce you to my firm, Michele Research Group. Some of you may be more familiar with us under our former name, McDowell Group. And this year, we're really excited to celebrate 50 years of research and consulting in Alaska. We have offices in Anchorage and Juneau, and we're really a multidisciplinary team of professionals that does everything from market demand assessments, business financial analysis, economic analysis, community and economic planning, and so many more things. We've done several projects throughout, the Mat-Su region, including Wasilla, and again, those span kind of the gamut of community development, workforce planning, most recently for the Mat-Su Health Foundation and others. Our lead on this project is our president, Donna Logan, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. I'm Katie Berry. I'm our director of economic, what am I? Sorry. I'm her director of economics and research, and I am based in our Anchorage office, as is Donna. We also have another small Alaska business joining us on this team, and that's Huddle Alaska, who's providing some community engagement support here.
Madam Mayor, could I just make a quick disclaimer? Just so everybody knows, I do have family members that work for McDowell Management. Moira Gallagher has just joined the team there for senior consultant, just so people know. And I don't think she's involved with this project, right?
She will likely be in the background of this project. We're happy to have Moira on our staff.
Disclosure. All right, thanks.
Thank you for the disclosure.
We're funding them, correct?
Are we funding them?
This project,
Mayor, may I ask a question then? Does the city of Wasilla have any funding to the Michele Group?
Deputy Administrator Nygaard.
So we were awarded a $70,000 grant from the Economic Development Administration, and then the city of Wasilla matched the $70,000.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No further questions.
Please continue.
absolutely. All right, so first I want to talk a little bit about what is an economic development strategy, and then a little more about the process that we'll go through for this planning period. The purpose of a SEDS is really for a region, a community, a state even, to think strategically about their economic development. And really what the Federal Economic Development Administration likes to see in these documents is prioritization. Knowing that the city of Wasilla or any region has a certain capacity to move their economy forward, the EDA likes to see projects and goals that really match that capacity to take action here. One important reason to have projects in a SEDS is that can be important as the federal government looks at certain funding sources. So they'd like to see that whatever project you are bringing to them is part of your prioritization and part of this strategy. Typically, a SEDS can be done, as I mentioned, at different levels of geography. So the state has a SEDS, most Alaska regions have a SEDS. It's a little different here to have a SEDS just for the city of Wasilla, but it's a really exciting opportunity, again, for the city to really think strategically. One thing that's really important to keep in mind with these planning processes for the SEDS specifically is that we're talking about economic development, which is generally about how to bring new wealth to your community, how to grow wealth for your community. It can be hard to distinguish sometimes from community development. community development, we often think about how to spend the wealth that you already have. So with this planning process, we're thinking economic development, we're thinking how to generate more wealth and move Wasilla forward.
Katie, if I may, so is the SEDS limited only to the city limits of Wasilla, or are we allowed with this grant to look at things that impact the city of Wasilla?
That's a great question. Thank you, Councilmember Graham. So we conferred with the city of Wasilla and with the EDA on this portion because, as you're well aware, the city limits of Wasilla are pretty narrow compared to the average person who might stop you and say, oh, I live in Wasilla. So we wanted the boundaries here to be fairly flexible when we think about geography. And what the city and the EDA settled on, kind of with the involvement of our firm, was the zip code boundary of Wasilla. That may seem like a kind of an arbitrary choice. Why would you choose zip code? That extends really from Port McKenzie to kind of the West Finger Lakes type area. You're probably familiar with that boundary. So that's meant to encompass, give you a little more room outside of those city limits to think about maybe infrastructure or other things that would impact the city, if that's helpful.
That's very helpful, thank you.
So as I said, the city of Wasilla having its own SEDS is a little different than we typically see, but regardless of that, we'll be following a pretty standard SEDS logic here. And I won't read this whole slide to you. It's maybe a little boring and tedious for an evening, but it all starts with a vision statement that addresses where does the city of Wasilla want their economy to be in the next 10 to 20 years. So that's the first thing that we'll be guiding the steering committee through, is that visioning work. The other core element that this all starts with is the SWOT. And I'm sure that many of you have been involved before in a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise. It's really important for the process of a SEDS to get that SWOT really nailed down, because it provides the foundation. And what the federal EDA wants to see is that whatever factor is listed in your SWOT is also addressed in the follow-on components here. So you can't have, you should not have the kind of hanging chads in a SWOT that are never addressed again. Everything should really flow together. From the SWOT, we typically advise, regions or communities to think of really 3 to 4 broad goals that they want to see for their economy. Again, this is the prioritization exercise of what are the 3 to 4 big goals that we want to tackle here. From there, things get progressively more specific. So for each goal, we help the committee develop really objectives. So what needs to happen to get there? And then next are really the action items and plans. And this is what folks really like to jump to. We like to think of this as kind of the to-do list of the SEDS. So it might be helpful to think about an example here. An example of something that might be in a SWOT would be high cost of doing business because there's limited transportation. So if that was a weakness, the strategic goal that might fit under would be, we want to develop some more infrastructure. An objective there might be, we would really like to construct a new road, and an action item might be, we need a memorandum of understanding with a landowner to construct that road. So you see how all of those pieces kind of fit together and get more specific on exactly what you're going to do. So within that process, our firm really has 4 key tasks that we'll be doing to really help shepherd this project. First is some economic baseline research, and that's about gathering and analyzing socioeconomic data, and as we already discussed, that's going to be at the level of the Wasilla zip code so that it's kind of broad enough to encompass more than just the narrow city limits. We'll also be speaking with community stakeholders, different community groups like the Chamber of Commerce, who we're going to speak with next month. That's a very important part of any economic development strategy plan, as this is meant to be the community's plan and key stakeholders' plan. It's not our firm's plan, and we can't tell you what you need to do. We really want this to be owned by the city of Wasilla. I talked a lot about the SWOT analysis and strategic planning, and we'll be, again, kind of walking the committee through those pieces. And then finally, a report will be developed from there.
Once again, Katie, on your gold bullet there, you talk about online survey. Will this survey once again be confined just to the city, or will it be the post office's description of the city, or will it, how is that going to work? Because there are many businesses that are not headquartered in Wasilla that operate in Wasilla.
Absolutely. So this is a very broad and open survey portal that's live now, where anyone who identifies themselves as a stakeholder can go and fill out this very basic form. So there is no proof of address test or you must be headquartered. This is really for anyone who says, I'm a stakeholder and I want to say in this. Along with that survey, we conduct numerous interviews, one-on-one conversations with key stakeholders. And I'll talk a little bit about the steering committee in a couple slides. We like to rely on that steering committee as well to help us understand who are the people that we really need to talk to for that, so that we get a varied group of perspectives there. And we don't miss any big group of stakeholders, big group of businesses, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
So here's the overall timeline of the project. We kicked off the community engagement in November with an economic summit that had really tremendous support, and there was just a really great gathering of stakeholders. At that gathering, we started to walk stakeholders through the SWOT analysis and gather kind of that first take on those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. From there, in November, we held a first steering committee meeting where that SWOT analysis, that initial analysis, was presented to the steering committee and further refined, and then we started some visioning work with that. Over the next 3 months, we'll be continuing with all of those core tasks that I showed, baseline research, continuing with strategic planning, continuing to speak with stakeholders. The ultimate piece of the timeline here is that by the end of June, a report and a plan will be prepared that's ready for the city to accept. And then from there, that plan goes on to the EDA for them to accept as well. So as I've mentioned a few times, we have formed a steering committee around this process because this is owned by the city of Wasilla and should reflect the constituents, the stakeholders of Wasilla. Again, our firm's role in this is to shepherd the plan, not to put words in anyone's mouth. The committee's role here, again, is to be the eyes and ears of the city, to weigh in on the plan and process, and to, again, help us understand who are these key people in the community that we must talk to, whose voices really need to be heard in this. Of course, every voice needs to be heard, but there are some stakeholders who have a really unique or different perspective on some part of economic development that we want to make sure is captured here too. As I said, we had a first work session in November to go through part of the SWOT, and we'll have 2 further work sessions where we continue to refine the plan. We're really fortunate to have 13 committee members who are committed to this said steering committee. I want to point a few people out. First is Mike Brown with the Mat-Su Borough. we're really pleased to have someone from the borough on this committee because we know that what happens elsewhere in the Mat-Su borough impacts Wasilla and vice versa. So kind of to Councilmember Graham's point there that things, infrastructure actions that are taken elsewhere are going to impact Wasilla, and it's important to have that perspective too. And then also wanted to point out, we're very pleased to have Councilmember Brown join the committee as well. So here's some next steps. As I mentioned, there is a survey live now that is open to anyone who identifies as a stakeholder of the city of Wasilla and wants to weigh in on the SWOT. We'll be conducting some interactive small group discussions throughout the community, the first of which, as I mentioned, is with the Chamber of Commerce next month. We will still be having those one-on-one conversations as the next couple months unfold. And then, of course, we'll have, our firm loves data. We're kind of data greedy, so we're going to be parsing through a lot of economic baseline data. And then we'll have some committee meetings coming up. The next one is tentatively scheduled kind of late February, early March, as these other pieces come together too. We really appreciate your time this evening and the opportunity to give you an update on the process. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer those at this time. Otherwise, I'll let you get on with the rest of your meeting.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Great presentation. So for the EDC acceptance of the plan, is that a hard timeline? You mentioned June of 2023. Is that a hard timeline? Is that a timeline based on our contract with you? Is that based on the EDC saying that you have to have it in by this time? What's the relationship of that date there?
Well, there's really two components, as you pointed out. There's a contract that we have with the city, and then there's also that grant that's come from the federal EDA to the city of Wasilla that has certain stipulations about timeline as well. So those two pieces drive that. But in general, I can also defer to Crystal for more on the timeline piece.
Well, let me be a little more specific, perhaps. So the plan gets completed, it gets brought to the council for ratification, verification, whatever it is that we'll do at that point. And we decide, no, it needs to be tweaked. If it runs into July or beginning of August, when the council says, yeah, we can live with that, is that a problem?
I'll say from our firm's perspective, we work until our clients are happy and really satisfied with what we've put together. So on our end, if tweaks need to be made, if there's still additional refinements to be made, we will see that through however long we need to, regardless of kind of the federal granting period. But I will defer to Deputy Administrator Nygaard to answer that.
Thank you. So we do have a June 30th deadline to have our plan into EDA. And the reason that is that when they give us the award, it's very specific to the 1 year to complete the plan. They'll make suggestions as well. So it's pretty nimble, but we want to make sure that we've got a good collection. So you could see it coming before the council in late April, in case we need to make any changes, and then it will go in June. And that's really critical because as soon as we get that approved, we can start accessing some of these extra funds that are available to cities like ours once they approve it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions? Thank you, Am.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is the Airport Advisory Commission, Public Works Director.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So on the, I believe it was the 22nd of December, we had our December meeting for the Airport Advisory Commission. We covered two main topics. we have started to talk about a rate study. The commission's interested in looking at the historical rates for the airport, and so I brought them a packet with some information about the lease rate incomes and the different times that they've been updated, kind of give them a perspective on where the rates are collected at the airport. There was also discussion about what rates might be increased, and they asked for some more information at the meeting that we'll be having in about 2 weeks. So I will be working on the packet for that. There was another topic about it was originally called an air show, but they decided that they wanted to call it a fly-in, Wings Over Wasilla fly-in, and some discussion about what it would take to make that a returning event. And so there was no action based on that. It was just a discussion. We talked about some other airport business with access controls and other topics that the commissioners were interested in. And we heard from several members of the general public about their ongoing satisfaction with the airport and some insights that they had about snow plowing and the different weather events that we've been having. So it was informative, but also a useful meeting with input from the public.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Johnson?
Madam Mayor? Eric, in December, I believe we met with a client who was looking for a lease of a certain space or looking for it. Did anything come of that?
Thank you for that question. So we have been looking at the layout for the airport, looking for possible developable area. Nothing official has come of that. My deputy and I have been scratching our heads trying to think of locations. We have a couple that we think rise to the top, but there hasn't been any official discussion with that interested party at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you. And Eric, for the fly-in, has a date been picked for that, a tentative date?
Thank you for that question. No, it hasn't risen to that level of planning. I believe, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't have the historical background on previous air show fly-ins, but the topic of discussion around that item was about an agreement in the past for raised funds, and if there was still a balance in whatever account that funds had gone into, the chairman was going to find some more information about any monies that still existed. So what I understand from the chairman's perspective was there may still be some funding somewhere that could be tapped, and he was intending to talk to the council at some point to see if there was any donated or secured monies that could be used. And I don't have the historical background in if that's true or not, so.
Well, if I could recommend that the commission propose a date as soon as possible, because there are many other entities in the city, just governmental organizations, public safety, the Menard Center, Parks and Rec, folks that you're sitting next to, that play into this fly-in. And so if we can, even if we don't pull it off, if we can kind of put those folks on notice that we're planning on having a big weekend that weekend, that would certainly be helpful. Thank you.
I'll let the chairman know.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Next is Planning Commission. We will get a report from our city planner.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So the Planning Commission met on December 13th. They had 2 items on their agenda. One of them was a dog kennel located on James T. Circle. It was going to be a combination of pets, training for service animals, and boarding of animals. The item was not approved by the Planning Commission. Based on the conversation and the input, the applicant chose the option to take that one back and to submit a new application. So we may move forward with that. You may also see a conversation or some language moving forward from the Planning Commission about adding some standards to kennels, better definitions. Right now, our code doesn't have a lot of guidance about what is a kennel, what isn't a kennel, and when should it trigger a review. The second item was actually the Public Works Director's item, which was the Capital Improvements Program. So those were the only two items on our agenda.
Okay. Any questions? You're in that. Oh, Mr. Graham.
A question not particular to those actions, but I've been going to the Planning Commission meetings for years, and it seems like we used to have a lot more activity at the Planning Commission than we do now. Has something changed administratively where the Planning Commission isn't as involved, or are we just seeing more people operating within the guardrails?
I think it's kind of interesting, it's a great question, I appreciate that. During COVID, we actually didn't see the slowdown in development. So when you look at our permit numbers and everything, interestingly enough, our numbers stayed up. But this past year, 2022, was the slowest year that it's been over the last 12 years. And I think a lot of it has to do with the cost of materials, the not having available qualified workers to work on projects, those kind of things. And that's where you've seen a lot of the decrease in activity. There's been a lot of research about non-conforming and code compliance issues that's taken up a lot of time with planning over the last year, working with code enforcement. But we just saw, that was our year that we saw the big decrease in even residential permits. I mean, we still had some, but I think it's just that financial component is too expensive and the materials aren't available.
Are developers giving you any indication of what their thoughts are for this coming year, or this year that we just started?
They typically don't get with us until about March, April. So I've heard a few things. None have been submitted officially, so I won't go into them here at a public meeting, but there's been a little bit of inquiry, but not a lot. But that's not unusual. Again, it's usually March and April that we see that activity start kicking up.
Thank you.
Colleen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hi, Tina. I just wanted to comment with regard to the dog kennels discussion that Planning Commission is having. And this was a very controversial issue, I believe,
Yes.
year 2000 or 2001. It's been a while, and I was on Planning Commission at that time. And it was an interesting discussion because we had, for example, a homeowner that thought she wasn't within the boundaries of City of Wasilla proper, and she had a kennel. Whereas someone who lived out Canicoos Bay Road was within city limits, had a 5-acre parcel, and yet she wasn't allowed to have a kennel, even though she had certainly plenty of land and proximity and what have you. So I just would advise that you look at the history on this issue and kind of see what's happened in the past. Just if that would help Planning Commission at all.
Oh, no, it would definitely be helpful to see the history and the concerns so that that can be addressed, and we won't miss that, and we'll make sure that's taken under consideration.
Well, in that way, you're not blindsided to by all of a sudden somebody coming in going, hey, by the way,
Right.
1995. No.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, Representative Eastman, would you like to give us a report, please?
Well, I will be very brief. Next week, the legislative session will kick off in Juneau. I will be there representing the city and the entire district, and be glad to see you and others come visit us. So I hope that you make the opportunity to take advantage of our time together with myself and all the other Valley legislators and all the other legislators from around the state. More input from the city of Wasilla, the better. And I think there'll be a great opportunity to have that earlier in the session. So the earlier you come down, I think the better audience that you're likely to get. But certainly like to get something on the calendar for a delegation coming down.
Okay. Let me tell you right up front, You know that 14.2 million for the airport that's in the governor's budget?
Yes.
When they pass the budget, I hope that's still there. Just saying,
Noted.
but thank you. Mr. Graham?
Representative Eastman, congratulations on your election, and please let me encourage you to contact council members individually when you need help. We typically don't hear a lot from our legislature until the last minute, but we would certainly, if there's things we can do to make your job easier, to help you, get the ball across the finish line, please contact us all. We're all in this together. Thank you.
That would be wonderful. And it's open both ways, so absolutely, please contact me or my staff at any time.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we, representative from Wasilla High School? Yeah, or, okay, a representative from Burchell High School.
Hi there, my name's Gene Hubbard. I'm president of Burchell High School. I'm here to represent. Hopefully, you guys know Burchell was founded in 1988 by Peter Burchell, the greatest man I've ever met. It's a very good school. I've been there for most of my high school years. We have definitely had great success on graduating students and also catching other students up with our ABLE program, which helps them to recover credits quickly in a matter of months. Personal experience that I have at Burchell, the staff there are amazing. I would not ask for any better teachers. It's like a well-oiled machine. The cogs keep on turning and the workers just keep working. The students there are getting what they need. They are getting all the services they are provided for. They get to sit down, talk to counselors if they're having any troubles. They get to go to a nurse if they need any help. And it is just a great school all around. So far, we don't have any current events that we are trying to look forward to right now. But we are planning on, in the near future, having a, what's the word for it? Talent show for the end of the year. This should be the first talent show that Burchell has ever seen, at least as far as I know.
Cool. Okay, Mr. Graham?
Thanks for being here, Jamie. This is it's always good to hear from Burchell. The rates of teen pregnancy are continuing to increase in today's society, and someone had told me that Burchell no longer has a child care center. Is that true? Do you know?
I personally do not know. I do know back in the past, Burchell has definitely been one of those schools for more of for the misguided.
Folks with challenges.
Yeah, let's just say that. And definitely it was a big school on teen pregnancy. Throughout many of the years that have gone by, it is definitely lowered down, and we are looking to be more of a better school for all. Bigger school, I should also say.
Thank you.
Mr. Graham, they do not have.
They do not. Thank you.
No.
I guess they don't have.
And I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just trying to find information. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we will close commission and agency reports, and we'll move on to public participation. There is one ordinance and one resolution scheduled for public hearing tonight. Madam Clerk, please read the title of the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ordinance serial number 2240, authorizing the mayor to grant certain easements and permits in furtherance of the Wasilla Main Street Rehabilitation Project.
The public hearing on ordinance serial number 22-40 is open. Anyone who would like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance serial number 2240?
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance serial number 2240.
Okay. Is there a second?
Councilmember Vlock, second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Sullivan Leonard and seconded by Councilmember Vlock to adopt ordinance serial number 2240. Council, before discussion, I'd like Madam Attorney to give a report on the ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be very quick. I think the most important thing here is just to note that this ordinance allows and grants the authority to the mayor to enter into easements that are necessary to move this project forward. But the property will be returned to the city after the completion of the construction of the project. So it really is just a facilitation tool to move the rehabilitation project forward.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair to Madam Attorney. Ms. Wells, were we going to request a motion to postpone indefinitely? And there were some issues with the easements? Our Public Works Director?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This was, I think you might have, were you working with Jess? Okay. All right, so then I think in light of that, there may
Something's
have
changed.
Yes.
been. Okay. I think I might be behind the 8 ball.
So, no, not at all.
So through the mayor, this has been a long time coming. So with DOT's legal team and our legal team, there were a few nuances that hadn't been settled. And there was some discussion about finalizing that before it came to this meeting. And so I think there's still a little bit of more work before our legal representatives are comfortable with the verbiage in some of the areas. So my understanding was that this will be tabled until that's settled through our legal team.
Madam Mayor, based on testimony of the Public Works Director, I move to postpone ordinance serial number 2240 indefinitely.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Sullivan Leonard to postpone indefinitely ordinance serial number 2240. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson?
I'm not opposed to tabling it. However, when we first, when the ordinance first came up, pardon me, back last fall, I had asked about the budget concerning paragraph G. So when this reappears after being tabled, I'd like to know what our projected costs for the maintenance and operation post-construction points 1 through 5, because I assume that those will then be in the city budget after that. Just so that we have, when we go into this, we'll have some idea as to what we're actually signing up for here. Thank you. No further comments.
Is there further discussion?
I got through without coffee.
Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please take a roll call vote on the motion to postpone indefinitely ordinance serial number 22-40.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard?
Yes.
Graham?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
And Vlock.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Sullivan Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, and Vlock in support. Councilmember Rubio is absent.
Okay, Madam Clerk, please read the title of the last item scheduled for public hearing tonight.
Thank you. Resolution serial number 2301, providing an opportunity for review and public comment pursuant to Wasilla Municipal Code 390-085C on the current collective bargaining agreement between the City of Wasilla and the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 302, and authorizing administration to enter into negotiations with the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 302 for a new contract.
The public hearing on resolution serial number 2301 23-01 is open. Anyone who'd like to testify, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to adopt resolution serial number 23-01?
Madam Mayor, I move resolution serial number 2301.
Is there a second?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Vilak, I second that.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Vilak to adopt resolution serial number 23-01. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Ellen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could Finance give me the number of employees that we have presently involved in this union or under the umbrella of this particular union?
To Councilmember Sullivan Leonard through the mayor. If I was estimating roughly, I would say around 25. And so WPDEA, which has like 56 members, is our largest. And so just kind of ratcheting down to say approximately 20 to 25.
And will
I
you be
could-
handling negotiations then for this particular contract?
So the ideal, the team would be Eric, myself, and then pending, we've got some additional legal budget. We would also use Birch Horton to help us with that negotiation process.
Thank you.
Is
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Graham?
Madam Mayor, I move to enter into executive session for matters the immediate public knowledge of which would clearly have an adverse effect upon the impact upon the finances of the city, specifically to discuss the collective bargaining agreement with Local 302. Those present in the executive session would be the entire council, the mayor, the clerk, the city attorney, and the finance director.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any objection to the motion?
I object. We've never done this before, so why are we doing this now?
I would like to move in to discuss some points in the contract which was provided to us and see where the city's negotiations are going to lead. Strictly because we haven't done something before doesn't mean it's something that's in error.
Correct. However, it's not usually a motion that we have with regard to the union contract. You usually wait to see what comes back with negotiations and then either vote it up or down. So you're wanting input then on the contract?
That is correct. As in the WPD contract, we went through the exact process that you had talked about, and there was no input from the council during, or no opportunity for input from the council during the contract negotiations. In this case, right up front, if we have concerns, we can address those with the negotiating team, and then they move forward.
Well, and can I ask then the attorney through Madam Mayor, sorry. So are we going beyond our scope as legislative members of the council here to administrative? Because we don't negotiate contracts, we don't administer contracts, we look at the numbers.
Well, and I think it does to, is this on? Apologize. I think it does matter what is going to be discussed and what those questions will be. And it also, one of the things I did try to reach Will Arnhart, who is the attorney that is working on the labor issues. Unfortunately, without notice, I was unable to reach him. I do think that it's beneficial to have him in any executive session where you were going to go through the negotiations and look at them more closely, and for us to look at the code. And because this hasn't been done before, I want to make sure that you're following the procedure and you're not overstepping. It's difficult to make that call without looking at what questions you're raising and what change in the process you're proposing, or what the impact of those would be. So I know it's not a straight answer, but I think we don't have enough information to determine propriety.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson?
if I may speak, I think the issue in executive session is that it would allow us to ask questions, realizing that this meeting is in public record, and if we even raise a question, it can go to the union as a negotiating item. It would put the city in a bad light. So at this point, I feel our hands are sort of tied. We can't really ask questions without putting the city into a negative bargaining position, and that would be the reason for executive session. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I had objected to going into executive session, and as such, part of it is also providing public notice so that people understand that we are going into executive session, no matter what the parameters are. We've not given the public any notice that we may be going into executive session. Now we know publicly within this meeting, but there's been no notice to anyone that we wish to do that. Again, I object to this, maybe next meeting or something, but it feels like today it's just moved forward just too quickly on that.
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, and thank you, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard. However, the city attorney, the exact same one that's sitting in the chair right now, 3 meetings ago told us that we could go into executive session at any time for any reason without public notice. So.
Well, and just to clarify, that you don't need public notice on your agenda to go into executive session, but you're still limited to the reasons for executive session, which I think is weight.
Right, which I
I
think is what we brought forward during my motion.
So with parliamentary procedures, there was an objection on the floor. Does that need to be voted on?
Okay, we are voting on the objection.
If I may, through the chair to the council, the motion on the floor is to enter executive session to discuss the union contract for matters immediate public knowledge of, which would clearly have adverse effect upon the city. And so that's really the bottom line. You're voting on whether or not you want to enter executive session. Councilmember Graham.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Velock.
No.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
No.
Madam Mayor, the motion fails with Councilmembers Graham, Johnson, and Brown in support. Councilmember Sullivan Leonard and Velock opposed. Councilmember Rubio is absent. Per our code, you need 4 affirmative votes to carry any measure before the council. So before you is the main motion then to adopt resolution serial number 2301.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Graham?
Without the opportunity for the council to have input prior to the negotiations beginning, I can't support this resolution, and I will vote against it.
Any other discussion?
Madam Mayor, to our city attorney, is there a way that we can, I know we have this on the table now, but that we can do something next meeting, so we know that what we're doing is okay, what questions are, where we're going. I don't want to be doing something we shouldn't be doing. Is there a way to do something in advance so we can actually plan this a little bit? Because I do agree with Stu that, we do need some input. We've had things in the past and we haven't had an opportunity, but I'm just not real comfortable in maybe how we're doing it. And maybe I can be with some explanation, but.
Sure. One of the things, this is just opening the contract to negotiations of where you are in the process and the purpose of this resolution, which means that council's participation, questions, that process has just started. It is not, that process is not foreclosed. This is just opening the negotiations. So there will be an opportunity to engage with council at other points throughout the process, and you will have, I think usually, Will has attended, you have had legal counsel at an executive session in past negotiations on one occasion I can recall. Later in the process. So Jen, do you want to?
To council through the mayor. So really this, this piece of legislation will allow us to reciprocate in the communication with Local 302 to say, hey, let's get a timeline, a schedule going so we can begin the negotiation process. I imagine that there would be some other mechanism if we were uncomfortable with moving forward in getting your answers or your questions answered tonight or allowing for input, that we could use another mechanism. Passing of this legislation would help us get the timeline established with 302, which, you know, oftentimes with everyone's schedule can be a difficult component of the negotiation process. Understanding that there may be reservations or direction that council would like to see us go. I mean, that is important going into the process so that we deliver a product that is going to meet the palate. And obviously we want to bring forth an agreement that's going to get approved.
And Councilmember Meeks, just to add to what the Finance Director is talking about, one of the things that's, is my microphone on?
No, how about you try another one, Michele?
Oh, wait, is that?
We got new mics on the
All right, now
There you go, perfect.
All right, so the other piece of this is the public hearing process. When you, generally speaking, and under your code, when you have a opening, we'll call it an opening resolution, it opens up the negotiations. One of the goals is to make sure that both employees, public members of the public, and council member, usually it's done in open session, but have an opportunity to talk about the contract as it exists. And so that gives the team pieces they need going forward. It doesn't foreclose an executive session. I think you can have an executive session and some of the questions or some of the directives might be beyond the scope, and that I think is what Councilmember Sullivan Leonard was worried about. But you can do an executive session, and then if they are beyond the scope, we will certainly direct you. But without an executive session, it's also appropriate to talk about this contract as it exists, and goals and objectives in open session, and allow your public to do the same, if that's helpful.
Mr. Green?
Thank you. And if I may perhaps clarify things a little bit. Today, public participation, items public hearing, resolution number 2301. The public has the opportunity to comment on this, on the contract now and where they would like it to go. The council also has the opportunity to have a discussion about that, as far as it's not going to be items that, you know, are detrimental to the city, you know, or items of which, whatever that word was that you gave me, to go into executive session. So we have had that. There was no one from the public who testified. So it's not like we have denied any access to the public to be part of this. Nor have we denied, nor do we plan to deny access to the public in the future. The public can come forth at any meeting, you know, for public participation and talk about whatever matter they want, you know, which could be this contract as we go forward. The council, however, is limited to what's on the agenda when it comes to talking about this contract. So this is the item on the agenda, is this contract. The next time that this contract will be on the agenda will probably be for approval. And I'm uncomfortable with that situation without having the council weigh in, which is why I brought it forward for executive session. But thank you for your explanation.
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair to the council and to the others, I think perhaps, Ms. Wells, what you're saying is that maybe in a month we can, maybe when the administration has some better idea that this just opens it up, it doesn't preclude us from scheduling an executive session on any future agenda for an update even, discussion and update. Is that maybe what?
Exactly. And also,
However, we have not
Well-
done that before, which would not override the objection.
no,
Executive
I
session.
think that it would have been, it's an appropriate subject for executive session now and in the future, whether it's in a month or, you will have an opportunity, and you certainly can, you can use the executive session mechanism, so long as it fits within the exemptions, which generally when you're giving, when you're getting direction and you're meeting on a labor negotiations, you fall within that. So it's appropriate. I do think that I would recommend having your labor union counsel, Will Arnhart, present if you have a really substantive, or if there are issues that are legal and, that have a legal element, because it could be useful.
When you mentioned the labor union council, did you mean council representing the union or the council that we will use
I
to
mean-
negotiate with the union?
I mean, legal counsel for the city of Wasilla that focuses on negotiations.
Thank you.
Of labor, which is,
Okay, is there, Mr. Johnson?
Madam Mayor, Joan, I do not want you to answer this question because I think it would have significance on the negotiations going on. But yet I would like to know the answers to what it is that we're planning, what is the boundaries, and what is the scope, and what you're trying to achieve in this particular contract, what the impacts will be on our budget in future years. Obviously, if you comment to this in public record, you just told the union what it is that we're going to do. And this is really what I would like to see answered in an executive session, to know what our boundaries and what we're planning on. Okay, rather than just coming up at the end and saying, well, we missed our goal. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Sullivan Leonard.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate everybody's comments regarding this, and with that, could we move this particular ordinance then to the next meeting? That way we would have full council involved here, and then if we gave notice that we want executive session on this, as well as having Mr. Arndt involved with our discussion, would there be objection to that?
Madam Mayor, one thing I would say is because this resolution only opens it allows the administration to open negotiations. I believe that may have an impact on their timeline, and I'll defer to.
Well, and with that, I see this ordinance failing tonight, and this is why I'm asking to consider it to be postponed definite to the next meeting. That way we have a full council. We then have it posted with regard to requests for executive session.
To Councilmember Sullivan Leonard through the mayor, obviously it would benefit the negotiating team to have this passed tonight so that we can begin communicating with 302. As of the way the process works, they have reached out to us. I have indicated we have to pass legislation before we can even begin to communicate correspondence and establishing a meeting timeline. So if it would fail, then I guess we would be in the same position, and we would bring it forth with the understanding that an executive session should also be included on the January 24th meeting.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson.
sort of as a compromise here, may I suggest and just sort of float an idea that we pass this resolution tonight, allowing it to go forward. However, we put an executive session on the agenda for next week, or next council meeting, to discuss this. Would that be acceptable? Madam Mayor, I move that we put on a,
No, you don't need it.
I don't need a motion?
I hear you for the executive session.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I thought I needed a motion for that. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please take a roll call vote on the adoption of resolution serial number 23-01.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Sullivan Leonard?
Yes.
Graham?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, the motion to adopt resolution serial number 2301 passes unanimously with Councilmembers Sullivan, Leonard, Graham, Johnson, Brown, and Wheelock in support. Councilmember Rubio is absent on the January 23rd agenda as directed by the City Council. We will have an executive session on the contract.
Now we're on to persons to be heard, 3 minutes per person. We're now, it's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. We have Miss Eileen from Wasilla.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and Happy New Year to all. Since it is the new year, I will remind you, if you are a member of WASI, your membership dues are due. Annual membership is $30. Lifetime for 50 to 64 years old is $240. Lifetime 65 to 74 years old is $180. Lifetime 75 plus, $120. And if you're 90, you get it for free. On behalf of WASI, I would like to thank anyone who participated in our Christmas giving. The donations that we received, we were able to put together gift bags with towels, blankets, little snack packs that were full of individual snacks and goodies, and distribute those to over 400 seniors for Christmas. These are people that probably have limited, if any, family members to give them Christmas gifts and to allow them to enjoy Christmas, and we are very appreciative of that. The Sunday before the first blizzard hit us, our Christmas kitchen staff and our Meals on Wheels drivers all congregated at WASI on Sunday to make sure there were enough meals and make sure they were delivered so that our homebound seniors had meals to carry them through the bad weather. They also did that before the next blizzard hit, right before Christmas. So we have an excellent Christmas. Our kitchen staff and our Meals on Wheels drivers are to be commended for all that they do for our seniors that look forward to that meal that comes to them. We have a free Boomers dinner dance. Those of you that enjoy the music of the 60s and 70s, we're doing a free dinner dance on January 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. with music of the 60s and 70s. There will be door prizes. It'll be a fun evening, baked potato bar. So if you're looking for something to do on January 21st, stop into WASI. We are also in the process of getting our Mid-Valley paid adult daycare service put into action, and hopefully that will happen in February. Thank you for your time and for supporting WASI. We always appreciate that.
Thank you, Eileen. We are now at the consent agenda. Madam Clerk, please read the title of the items for approval under the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have special meeting minutes of November 19th, 2022, regular meeting minutes of November 28th, 2022, special meeting minutes December 14, 2022, and special meeting minutes December 15, 2022. Introductions with the public hearing date of January 23rd, 2023. Ordinance serial number 2301, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating $75,000 from the water fund balance for flow analysis and well exploration in pressure zone 4. Ordinance serial number 2302, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating $565,000 from the water fund balance for repairs to the Spruce and East Susitna water towers resulting from the January 2022 windstorm. Ordinance serial number 2303, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating $335,000 from the water fund balance for connecting the new 8-inch backup well to Spruce Avenue water system. Ordinance serial number 2304, amending the fiscal year 2023 budget by appropriating an additional $123,850 from the water fund balance for repairs to the Spruce Avenue and East Susitna water towers. Resolutions for approval under the consent agenda. Resolution serial number 2222, extending the Landscape Standards Review Committee for an additional 6 months beginning January 2023. And Resolution 2223, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Colony High School Hockey Booster Club for lease space in the Curtis D. Menard Memorial Sports Center in the amount of $600 for 3 months, January 1st, 2023 through March 31st, 2023, and the amount of $1,200 for a 6-month period of October 1 through March 30th, and for the 4 following years, 2023 through 2027. 2 action memorandums. The first is AM number 2243, authorizing the city of Wasilla to enter into a contract with Sound Decisions to acquire and install microphones and other components of the audiovisual system in council chambers. And lastly, 2301, approval of the goals and initiatives for fiscal year 2024.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Brown move the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilman Johnson.
It's been moved by Councilmember Brown and seconded by Councilmember Johnson to approve the consent agenda as read. Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. There's no unfinished business, and under new business. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
Madam Mayor, I respectfully request a 5-minute break.
Sure. Time is 7:11. We will be back at 7:16. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So we had 3 items moved to new business. We'll just go in order unless there's objections from the body. So the first is ordinance serial number 2305, amending Wasilla Municipal Code Title 9, Public Peace and Welfare by adding Chapter 910, sex offenders, to prohibit registered sex offenders from establishing permanent residency within 1,000 feet of schools, daycare facilities, and public parks after the effective date of this ordinance, and to prohibit supervised housing programs from housing sex offenders in residential zoning districts. And this ordinance is up for introduction.
Okay, Mr. Graham.
Madam Mayor, I move ordinance serial number 23-05.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilman Johnson.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Johnson
What is the motion?
to approve.
Recommend for public hearing on January, or,
Introduce and set for public hearing.
There you go. yeah, that was it.
You want to do that on January 23rd?
That's what I said.
Actually, Madam Mayor, there are people that have been real crucial on this particular ordinance that can't attend the meeting on the 23rd. May we move it then to the following meeting date, please?
So
I have no objection.
that would be February 13th.
Okay. Is there discussion? Mr. Graham.
Madam Mayor, I asked for this introduction to be taken off the consent agenda and moved to new business, recognizing that this is I won't say a hot button issue, but I will say it is an issue that has generated a lot of comment and concern throughout the community. Our legal staff has spent quite a bit of time with her firm looking into this, doing a bunch of research, as you can see from the 100 pages or so that are part of this ordinance and the staff report that goes with it. There's quite a bit of information to be digested, and the ordinance that has been brought forward is a nice piece of work, but I think it is incomplete and needs some work. So bearing in mind that we had a similar situation with our ethics ordinance, where we brought something forward and we needed to tweak it and we needed to move things and we needed to have discussions. I asked for this to be moved off the consent agenda, and what I would recommend is that after we set this for public hearing on February 13th, that the council move into committee of the whole so that we can discuss this, and perhaps the legal counsel can look at some potential changes or amendments, and so that we can move forward as a whole as opposed to trying to amend things on the floor. So I am going to vote in favor of setting this for public hearing on February 13th, but I will then move in our committee of the whole after that vote. Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Colleen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just so council is aware, both the attorney and myself and council members and administration did have a chance to take a look at this, help draft it, and help get it into a legal format, so that way there would be no challenges with regard to the constitutionality of housing for those that may be affected by either alcohol, drug abuse, or sexual offenders. And so we were pretty careful and meticulous to try to piece it together that would meet our city and the needs of our community that have come forward and said, you know, what we presently have at the city level is not acceptable. So I welcome council's input on this. If there are changes that they see that need to be made, I welcome their input and appreciate Holly Wells answering those questions and helping us move forward on this particular ordinance. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes.
Mayor, I move that we enter committee of the whole to discuss ordinance serial number 23-05. Potential ordinance serial 23.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Graham, seconded by Councilmember Sullivan Leonard to move into the committee of the whole. Is there any objection? Hearing none, we are in committee of the whole at 7:22. Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard. As Councilperson Sullivan Leonard pointed out, there's been a lot of work done on this from a lot of different angles, but it's always good to have each set of eyes on the council kind of address what the concerns are, so that when we actually get to the point where we're going to vote yes or no on an ordinance, that we think everybody has been heard and had a chance to have those issues resolved, much like we did during the ethics ordinance. So, Councilperson Sullivan Leonard mentioned a huge concern with the constitutionality regarding housing discrimination for folks in this that fall into this particular category, because sometimes they also fall into another category as well, which could result in some things. But some of my specific concerns, and although I would like to hear more about that, is when I look at the ordinance on page 3 of 7 or page 149 of your packet, assuming that the packet numbers are the same as they are in electronics. I'm old school, I do the paper thing. But I'm looking at line 73, which is item B, says sex offenders who reside in a prohibited area on or before the date of this chapter becomes effective may continue to reside in that location, but may not purchase or lease a new permanent residence within the prohibited area after this chapter becomes effective. You know, a concern I have there is would they be able to renew a lease that they have? For instance, the end of their 6-month lease, their 3-month lease, their 1-month lease, whatever situation they have there, would they be, it says they can't enter into lease a new permanent residence, but it doesn't say whether they can or cannot renew a lease on a property they are currently occupying. You know, and when you talk about purchasing, would that mean, what if they decided to refinance their home? I don't think that's as big a concern there, but renewing a lease, I mean, something like that could theoretically go on forever, which I don't think would fit the intent of what we had talked about. So I would like to see that be addressed and perhaps talked about. And then further on page...
Excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you want to have answers as you go along, or do you want to do the whole scope? And
Well, I've just got two things
Okay.
that I want to throw out, and then, you know, floor is open to whomever yells the loudest, I think. And then the second thing is on line 142, which is on page 152, when it just talks about the hearing officer there. I know, you know, the city has, you know, we appoint a hearing officer, but I think it's called an administrative hearing officer or something like that. Do we need to have a different sort of qualification to deal with if someone appeals to this? I mean, is our current regulation, our current format of having a hearing officer, do the qualifications for that hearing officer, which are mostly, you know, administrative, you know, dealing with dog kennels and that sort of thing, do we need a different type of qualification for this hearing officer? And those were my two kind of most pressing concerns, and I'll turn the floor over to whoever would like it at this point.
Sure, Colleen.
Well, and Councilmember Graham, I think probably we also would look at B, which is number 135. Maybe we could get that looked at then, because I think your question is also with regard to validity of a hearing officer, and then your request for exemption. Is that what I'm hearing you say? Okay. So I would like the attorney's assistance on this. If she could answer those 3 questions with regard to Mr. Graham's questions, if we could, please.
Absolutely. I will say, so the way that it is designed, residency is established by intent, and the risk of taking a property interest away from someone, a currently held property interest, is significant. I do think that is where the city would run into issues with constitutional parameters. So the way this is written is if a person is a permanent resident or intends to be a permanent resident, owning or leasing at that establishment, then we are not going to kick anybody out of their current permanent residence. And so at the way it's drafted now, if they are leasing and they're renewing the lease, but it's the same residency, the same location, property, then they would be able to continue to do that. We can look at changing it so that it is, if it's a lease, it's at the end of the term. But because of the property interest, which is a significant one with residency, I am nervous about that. And there's lots of provisions here that are designed to be as concrete and as compliant with the Constitution as possible, because we have not gone here before in the state of Alaska. This is, Wasilla will be the only municipality to go to this extent with their prohibitions. And for that reason, as an attorney, I am nervous. It doesn't mean that we can't be more aggressive with the provisions. So what I can try to do too for the next meeting is make sure I'm very clear with the line, so that if council wants to take a bit more risk, you can do that, and you understand I'm not telling you you can't as your lawyer. I'm just sort of showing you the spectrum, if that makes sense. So I'll do a little research outside Alaska, because we may have some provisions that are out there that can give us some guidance.
And I'm not, please forgive me if I seem to be asking you to put your neck on the line. That's not what I'm asking you. You are an attorney at a very large firm that specializes in municipal and government issues. So I'm sure that you just didn't draw this up on your own. I'm sure you have other legal eyes looking at this as well. And that's one of the questions that I would like your firm, to kind of take a look at it and see if things are there. Because I did notice in the majority of the supporting documentation that was here, I mean, most of this stuff is aged, to put it mildly. Of course, I'm pretty well aged myself, and this isn't quite as old as I am, but some of it is, pushing 20 years. So, like you say, if we look outside the states and with your firm's contacts to other attorneys, I'm sure you go to the same legal conferences, and we go to government conferences, and MTA goes to telephone conferences. I'm sure there are contacts out there that could help resolve that issue. I'm not suggesting that we set the city up to get sued, even though if we are going to get sued, this would be a great thing for us to stand behind. But I would like to hear something a little more based on a little more current than what we have in this 100-page packet today.
Well, and one thing I will say, which it's great that you're having this discussion, so those 100 pages that were provided in the packet were to make sure council takes the time to make this decision. Because ultimately it's not a legal decision, but it must not be an arbitrary decision. So while our firm looks to what is outside, one of the things, and it's difficult to say this and maintain humility, I do not want to sound like I'm being arrogant, but I am fortunate to have practiced municipal law for municipalities throughout the state of Alaska with a real focus on constitutional elements for about 18 years. And I have learned over that time that it is never wise to look to others in determining constitutionality. It is very important to look to the Constitution and the case precedent that applies to the city of Wasilla. One of the things we really know, and I think intrinsically feel, especially in this community, is how different we can be, how unique and tailored our laws are, and our Constitution, which is one of the most protective constitutions in the country. And so for that reason, a lot of what we look at doesn't actually pertain to us. It might seem to at first, but we have to be careful and balance that. But there's a lot of ideas and concepts regarding research that council members should and can consider. And it's really important to me that we hear your comments and your reasons for deciding what to do, because ultimately in this arena, it's really gonna turn on why you're making the decisions and whether or not that decision is tailored to the goals of the city. And if that, and here, because we are not talking about a protected class, it will matter whether or not it's an arbitrary decision, or whether or not it's a rational decision. So if that's helpful to give you sort of the parameters that we're gonna be
It is, and
delving
it's
into
also
with this ordinance.
interesting that you mentioned 18 years, because in the documentation that you provided, it talks about the United States Supreme Court has declined to rule on the issue of, regarding 1,000 feet of school bus stops and so on and so forth. And that was 2005 was what your information quoted in here, which just oddly enough happens to be 18 years ago. So welcome to the legal profession, but yeah, so I mean, that's, I agree with you. We don't want to make our decision based on what others think, but we do need to be aware of what others think and of what other courts have said. And almost none of this supporting packet here, I don't know that I read anywhere in here any citation from the Alaska Supreme Court. So, yes, we would be doing some groundbreaking here, but at some point somebody needs to pick up the shovel, and I'm not afraid to get that process started when it comes to protecting the youth and families in our that are citizens of Wasilla.
Madam Mayor?
Madam Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I just wanted to comment that with regard to the lease process for these different RMs, for example, Ms. Jacobson, who lives on Patricia Avenue, has been working on this for almost 2 years. And during that time period, they have had residents at the Youthos house that have been registered sex offenders to the tune of 10 people per 16 children in that particular little neighborhood. And so we do see that with regard to a lease, people are moving in and moving out. So the difficult part is that, when the community comes to us and they said, hey, we really do find that this is a difficult situation, and especially for our children, but as individuals are moving out, sex offenders are moving in. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball here because we haven't done anything to help the neighborhood yet. And so, to Councilmember Graham's point, is there a perimeter that we could put around the lease with regard to someone who resides at this place? Because I can see 2 long-term members that reside there, whereas 4 have come and gone. One is already reoffended and back in jail. So I'm just saying, is it prudent for us to look at putting perimeters around it, or let it be and then let attrition then continue to move sex offenders out of city of Wasilla areas such as this with a high number of students, children, excuse me?
I think it's worth looking at to see what your options are, because I don't know. I don't know if, I think when drafting this, there were certain areas where I would say I pushed my own comfort zone to get where I thought that council's direction was regarding this ordinance, and then made sure that the law supported that. So there's nothing in this ordinance I find to be unlawful based on my research and review. But again, there's nothing like this in Alaska, so we all shall see. But on the face of the law, based on the reasons and directive of council, this ordinance appears to be a lawful one, and I would stand behind that. But I do think there are areas, so that's one of the provisions. I didn't feel like I pushed it. I just sort of put what I thought would meet the property interest protections under our Constitution. So what I will do is, the difficult thing, the only other constitution that is as protective as our own in some of these arenas is Hawaii. I will see, because we're young states, and so they put there may be some other states that I can find some direction from in the property interest arena. So I will come prepared if I believe that it is legally defensible. I will come with that provision so that council can make a choice similar to our code of ethics approach, and then council can decide if that's a revision or an amendment they want to make. If that works for the city clerk, if I have sort of a list of. Okay.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thanks, legal counsel, for her prior comments. And I would say to all of us, do not let compassion and feelings get involved. Closely read your Alaska Constitution, especially when it comes to corrections and what we say about that. I understand there's a problem. I understand citizens are concerned, and I think we all want to keep all citizens safe, kids and adults. But the Alaska Constitution addresses those issues and addresses what right offenders have also. And they are human, and there's federal policies and regulations that address people who are in treatment. So we need to be very careful what we do. It doesn't do any good to pass an ordinance that satisfies an immediate problem, but end up in court and spending millions of dollars trying to defend something when we didn't make it for the right reason. So read your Alaska Constitution closely before you vote on this and make sure that we are going on the right track. I want to address the problem that has been brought to us by a citizen, but I also want to address the rights of offenders also.
Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you not send this to the state AG and he refused to weigh in on it?
Yes, we have really tried to engage the state just to get their thoughts, especially on the scope of their authority. You know, and because the state does have a sex offender registration or registry, because that registry now has, which was required by law after a court case that found that the failing to have an exemption that allowed offenders to say or to prove or show that they are not dangerous to society, the court found that that the state had to have that exemption, had to give them a chance to demonstrate that they were not a danger to society in order to be constitutional, in order to be lawful. Now that they have that exemption, that is why it's, you know, we believe that the city's desire to put these limitations or prohibitions in place would be constitutional, because we know that based on the state program, sex offenders on the registry are dangerous to, they've been determined by the state to be dangerous to the community. That said, it would certainly be more comfortable to have the state of Alaska weigh in on this and the scope of our authority, since they are predominantly the regulating authority on sex offenders, right? So that's where we are. They have not responded to us.
Thank you.
And being as how the election has passed, might the state be a little more amenable to answering the question or addressing the issue?
I don't think so. You know, we continue to try, and we'll continue to, you know, there is only, I think, because the council is looking for information, because you are engaged in the conversation, because you are including the public, this is not an attempt to, you know, as we saw tonight, pass legislation without careful thought regarding it. So for that reason, we will continue to sort of flag it and call, but what we have from them right now is really, it's with some departments it's silence, and with others it's the, a responsive communication saying this is not something that we weigh in on. So it appears from everything we're seeing now that the state is deferring to the municipality to govern itself within its boundaries. So that's what we are taking from our communications and lack of communications with the city. But we'll keep trying until it's effective.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Johnson.
to Holly, I have two questions. One, is there a sunset on the designation on any one individual for sex offender, or is it labeled and it's perpetuated until the guy dies or the person dies? Number one. And number two, is there anything in this ordinance that would prohibit a sex offender from moving back into a residence that he owned prior to the offense?
So
So this ordinance is designed to protect the property interests of a registered sex offender within the city of Wasilla. It's designed to do nothing to disturb those property interests, because the question of whether or not I, as a resident, could come to a community and look at the zoning rules and decide, you know, in the zoning laws and say, this is where I'm gonna live, or this is not where I'm going to live, or this is where I can live, or this is where I can do X, Y, or Z, right? Maybe have a kennel or whatever that might be, is different, and it's a different right than I live or I own property here, and the city of Wasilla is going to take that from me. They're going to take that interest from me. Whether it's an interest in a lease, you know, which is something that they hold, a intent to be a permanent resident at a specific address and be there in a lease, you know, and have the property there, you know, or its ownership of property. So you can imagine, and the lease question, the reason why I really want to make sure we explore it, and then I'll bring back language if it looks like it's defensible, you know, you imagine, and I encourage all of you to do this, put every provision in here, have a image of who is going to be affected and what that looks like, because that'll certainly be what happens if we are ever litigating this. So, and by that I mean, imagine a person who has had a year-to-year lease for 15 years. Everything they own is in that house, and they have a family, and, you know, 10 years ago, they had an indiscretion, maybe something that, you know, maybe indecent exposure, and it lands them on a registry list. Now, again, they have an exemption process, so now with the registration, we know that they could have taken advantage of an exemption, so there is a presumption that they are a harm to society. But is the city of Wasilla prepared to adopt an ordinance that says to that person, your lease is up, your family is kicked out, you cannot live there anymore together, you're gone? And are we prepared to defend this ordinance if that challenge is brought in court? So that is a very different challenge than a person coming in who is a registered sex offender, looking at what their housing options may be, and noting where 1,000 feet from a school is. And that provision is also one we see much more uniformly throughout the country. So I don't know if does that help, Councilmember Johnson? So, but I will say this, off the top of my head, I cannot remember the term for a registered sex, you know, what that looks like, if it's so that is information I'll come back with too, because I need to check the criminal statutes.
And I believe when persons are placed on the offenders lit registry, there is a time certain for them to be on that based on the severity of their crime. So, well, you don't have the mic in your hand, but there were two other things that I'd like you to kind of think about. One, with the ordinance itself, dealing with distance between residences for offenders. You know, I mean, we don't allow, certain things within certain distances. For instance, in this case, you can't live with, I don't know exactly what it says, 1,000 feet of a school or a park or a daycare center, things like that. I would like you to look into, can we prohibit or place a prohibition on sexual offenders, persons on the registry, living within a certain distance of one another. I mean, all of the research in criminology tells us that the best way to keep someone from recommitting a crime or re-entering, the criminal element is to separate them from that criminal element to begin with. So the worst thing we can do is send somebody to jail for shoplifting, while they're living in a home with 15 other shoplifters, and then, you know, they pay their fine or they do their time or whatever, and they go back to the same 15 people, and that just, it just does them no good. So it seems to me there would be a benefit, a social benefit, to having a physical separation between residences. And when I say residences, I'm not talking about the people, I'm talking about the properties, between the properties of sexual offenders, you know. And this would also prohibit or discourage things from happening like the complaint that was brought forward, what's it been, 8 months now? It's been quite a while, where you have several offenders living in the same building because the owner of the building is, you know, has no objection to that. Whereas the city could say, well, you know, you can't live within 200 feet of another sexual offender. That would keep a duplex from having, you know, a sexual offender on each side, or a fourplex, you know, that's sort of thing. I would like you to look into that and let me know, is that a reasonably legal prohibition? Is that something that would stand the test of time? Because almost everything I see in what you have put forward and all of the documentation, and believe it or not, I actually looked through each of these pages, which I highly recommend everybody else does as well, because there's a lot of great information in there. But everything I see is based on distance. So I would like to know, can we distance ourselves? Can we, for instance, say that, you know, as a council member, Mr. Brown can't live within 1,000 feet of another council member, you know, but in this case, we're talking about sexual offenders. So can we?
Okay, Stu, you and Michele gotta move, one of you have.
So I would like to see an answer to that. And also in the staff report, you know, it does say, you know, that this isn't the end all, this is the starting point. And it will be followed up by other legal work, ordinances, regulations, so on and so forth. The one thing that I see missing immediately is teeth. There is no way to enforce this other than to notify someone, well, you know, you're living in an area where sexual offenders are not allowed. And they say, you know, sorry, I signed a lease, I'm here to stay. So I would like to see the whole package brought forward, or as a minimum, a package that includes the revision to the code that says this is the fine, this is the daily fine for violating this ordinance, and what other legal teeth we could use. I would like to know that when you come back with your gunny sack full of answers.
Okay, and one thing I will tell you is the lack of a fine in here outside the general penalty, but not putting a fine in here that would be enforceable by the city, was intentional, was to lean on the injunctive. So right now, if there's a violation of this, you would go to court and enforce it. You could get an injunction.
Which could take months.
Which, well, you'd go get, well, what we would do if there was a violation, we would, and the city wanted to enforce it, the city would go to, you know, give notice and go get an injunction, which you can get an expedited injunction in certain cases if qualifications are met. But that allows the city to enforce it, but to enforce it by removing the violation or removing the person, and to also ensure that we get that sort of court so that it goes before a court. So we know that we are involving that extra level of due process and not just accumulating a fine, because otherwise, so for example, if there's a violation of this and you have a fine that's $300 a day and it accumulates, you are talking about a person's residency, you know, so then you're citing them and then you're going to court to get this penalty paid, but you're not getting that court action and that due process that would be associated with injunctive action. So but we can I'll bring back a fine, and I'll articulate better why with an ordinance like this, if there is a violation, being able to enforce it by saying, you have a notice of violation under this section, you need to leave. we're going to, this is a notice of.
Right, and I haven't had
We're
the
gonna take action to make that happen.
misfortune to be caught yet, to the point where I've had to go to court and had a fine and jail time, or had a fine and some other action to do. But that's not uncommon, I mean, it's 30 days in jail plus $1,000. But that's at a different level. That's a state level sort of thing as opposed to us. I mean, if we are to be very specific in here about this is the process that we intend to use, we intend to immediately get an injunction which would remove you from your residence. And in addition to that, you're going to get fined, or the property owner will get fined. If you're renting to one of these persons, I think that's something that I would be interested in hearing about.
I will bring back those provisions and then council can look at them and decide what avenues we want to take with the final ordinance, if any.
Yeah, and I think with that too, just as you stated, Councilmember Graham, who's at fault here? Is it the sex offender or is it the property owner? Because they're the ones that are offering a lease for someone. So they're kind of going against what our code is. So who gets fined? Or who gets charged? So it's really property owner more than the sex offender. He's been told he's got a place to stay. Unbeknownst to him, he's not allowed to be there by Wasilla City Code.
Mr. Brown?
Madam Mayor, your last question about the distance, is it your intent to remove all rehab and homes out of the city of Wasilla?
No, it is not.
Because if you said
the,
you can't be in the same house.
The ordinance as it sits now deals with proximity to schools, daycares, and parks. So that would be if you have two persons within 1,000 feet of that, they have to be separated by a certain distance. So no, it has nothing to do with removing them.
The example you used was two shoplifters in the same house.
Right.
So,
But that example there was to deal with recidivism, not to deal with.
right, but you was actually to bring back
Right.
some distance separating each sexual offender, so that would eliminate all group rehab homes.
It would eliminate group rehab homes that are within 1,000 feet of a park.
Oh, okay.
And so perhaps I misspoke, I apologize.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So with the distance of 1,000 feet, which is roughly a quarter of a mile, has anybody actually looked at our property, drawn circles around where all the prohibited areas are, and to make sure that there actually are properties that could be used for such a purpose? Or did we, by the 1,000-foot rule, eliminate most of the city from having residents, which I think would be a constitutional issue?
Councilmember Johnson, that is an excellent question. I think having that map up so council can consider it is important. I do not think that if this is constitutional, which I believe it is, even if you eliminate a significant amount of residential, I do not think that it is a violation of the Constitution, so long as the rules that you're applying are specifically and directly tied to the harm you're trying to prevent, and you've considered documents and evidence and research and are making a rational, non-arbitrary decision. That said, and again, I'm not going to foreclosing a provision regarding the distance of residents, but I did look into that. That was one of the questions that came up because it derived from the issue that sort of sparked this. And I determined, it was my opinion, that was a hornet's nest because it was difficult to enforce, it was difficult to define, it was difficult to determine constitutional implications for one person who moved in last, who has to now go, versus somebody who got there a little bit earlier, versus somebody, there were all of these situations in the sort of in the time continuum that made it very difficult to see how in real life it would play out without raising a lot of personal right violations, property right implications, and discrimination claims between residents. Because if you say you can only have, we can't have more than 4, well, then you get into, well, this person moved in last, now we're fining this person, this person is violating our laws, but the person who is number 3 isn't violating our laws? Or do we send a violation notice to everybody? Or do we make them prove and provide evidence as to who moved in when and how that works? So that for that reason, it seemed like the resources required to navigate that administratively were, a bit overwhelming. I will look at it again though and bring it back. And then to the extent I still feel as strongly that it is not it certainly is not my recommendation, I'll explain why, and hopefully we can see where. And who knows, things are changing all the time, so that's the other thing, we are constantly looking back at the laws and cases because there's a lot of movement.
Okay, do I hear a motion to come out of the committee of the whole?
Councilman Brown, so moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Brown, seconded by Councilmember Sullivan. Is there objection? Hearing none, we're out of the committee of the whole. We are on to AM 2242, which is action memorandum recommended for approval.
Let me read that into the record.
Yes, please.
Next item under new business this evening is AM number 2242, confirmation of mayoral appointment of Mary Champagne and Leonard Jones to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Aaron McCarty and Charles Morris to the Airport Advisory Commission, Ian Crafton and Timothy Burney to the Planning Commission, and Joseph Levesque as hearing officer.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, I move AM number 2242.
is there a second?
Councilmember Vilak, I second that.
Been moved by Councilmember Graham and seconded by Councilmember Vilak to approve AM 2242. Is there discussion?
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move this to new business strictly based on the volume of appointments that are here and seats that have been vacant, some of these for quite some time. And when you look at the Airport Advisory Commission, that's half the commission that we're, almost half the commission that we're looking at. Same thing with the Planning Commission that we're looking at, and we're lumping in an administrative hearing officer. The way I read the code is it kind of takes an affirmative action by the council to approve appointments. The council could deny approval of the appointments. I have no objection to any of the appointments that you've made. I think they're all good choices, and I will vote to approve this, but I would certainly like to see appointments in the future come through individually wherever possible and much closer to the date of vacation of the seats. Thank you.
Mr. Graham, you can't appoint somebody if they don't apply. And that's what we were up against, or what I was up against, is because Mary Champagne to the Parks and Rec, she is, her term was up, and so she reapplied. Leonard Jones was from out of the city. He's the only resident, the borough resident. The two to the Airport Advisory Commission, all of a sudden, we've got all these people that's applying. And so Tim Burney is reappointed to the Planning Commission, and Ian Crafton has graciously applied to be on the Planning Commission. So, and with the Administrative Hearing Officer, he is reapplying for his term. So it ain't like they're all brand new.
And do we have two administrative hearing officers, or is there just one? Do you know, Madam Clerk? Or?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councilmember Graham. So we will appoint, we're looking for another hearing officer. I have reached out to a few. If it's, granted, it's not my confirmation, but I think having municipal experience is important. I'd like to see somebody with some land use experience. Those tend to be our most technical cases. And I guess I'm being a little picky, but I want to do right by the city.
Okay. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, is there objection to the motion? Hearing none, it is so moved. We are on to IM 2216. Madam Clerk.
That's an informational memorandum, which was moved from communications to new business. IM 2216, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, DBE, Program 49, CFR 26, City of Wasilla Program for Municipal Airport.
Madam Mayor, I move IM 2216
For discussion.
for discussion. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second, by Councilman Johnson.
Been moved by Councilmember Graham, seconded by Councilmember Johnson, to move 22 information memorandum 2216 for discussion.
Objection to the motion.
Is there any objection to the motion?
Madam Mayor, discussion? Slow.
Right, but the motion had to be approved for you to have the discussion, so
Oh, I'm
that's where
sorry.
we're at now. This is just an informational. Okay, Mr. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding this disadvantaged business enterprise program, which is, of course, required, as my understanding is required through the funding that we're using to work with the airport. My real question was on addendum 5-1, which is page 403 of the packet, that talks about the overall 3-year goal methodology, and it says submitted separately. So does that mean it exists and has been submitted, or it will be submitted separately? I'm somewhat confused. I mean, this gives us our first chance to step up to the plate, but yet it doesn't say how many swings we're going to get to make this work, or how we will be swinging, so to speak. Do we know the answer to that?
Public Works Director.
As you correctly stated, this is a process that's required by the FAA through our grant. I'm going to have to circle back with our consultants to identify what submitted separately refers to. I don't have the answer for you tonight.
Okay, could you make sure that the clerk is notified of that so she can notify the council?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have no further discussion. I see Mr. Johnson.
Johnson.
So I guess I'm a little bit confused as to why we're doing this. I mean, is it just because, do we have to do it in order to get the DOT funding? Or is it that would give us access to more funding? Or what is it that the main objective in this program is? Thank you.
Through the mayor, my understanding is that it's required for federal funding. If we receive federal highway monies directly, we would also have to meet this requirement for federal highway monies. So
Thank you.
we only see this through the airport because of our involvement with FAA at this point.
All right, we're moving on to audience comments.
Did you want to go over, sorry, Madam Mayor, the other communication
Oh,
items?
I'm sorry. You have to wait. Madam Clerk.
So we have other items I'll just quickly read into the record under communications, no action required. We have IM number 2217, informing the council of the Airport Advisory Commission Resolution Serial number 2201, supporting the expansion of the Wasilla Municipal Airport. IM number 2301, monthly financial reports for the period ending November 30th, 2022, to include the month-to-date expenditure report and disbursements greater than 10,000. Commission meeting minutes, Airport Advisory Commission, December 22, 2022, and Planning Commission, December 13th, 2022.
Thank you, ma'am. We are on to audience comments. It's a time for members of the public to share their views with the council. This is not a question and answer period or a time for dialogue. Speakers may be referred to administration, or issues raised may be taken under advisement by the council or administration. Is there anyone present who would like to address the city council? If so, please come forward and begin by stating your first and last name. Comments limited to 3 minutes per person.
Quite the read you have to do. My name is Ian Crafton. First, just thank you for approving me to the Planning Commission. One note I wanted to make, just maybe something to consider when you guys bring up the discussion for Ordinance 2305. It only mentioned that they can't purchase or renew their lease there. And what normally happens is once somebody's lease ends, their lease falls to a month-to-month situation. And in theory, they could stay there indefinitely without renewing their lease. If the landlord tried to increase their rent, that would be renewing the lease or changing the rules. But in theory, I mean, obviously we have people that don't care about having multiple people in one location. And we run into the difficulty of, well, we can't just tell you, hey, you have to move out after 6 months of being on a month-to-month lease, but just something to consider is there something we can do to work with that? Because again, the intent is to not allow them a permanent residence if their intention is to have a permanent residence there. And I would say if you're not renewing your lease because you know if you try to renew your lease you now have to leave, that would be the intent of keeping a permanent residence there. So just maybe something to start bringing into that conversation there. That's all I wanted to mention, something I thought of there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we will close audience comments and move on to Mayor, Clerk, Attorney, and Council comments. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a reminder to council, I will be out of the office, personal leave, January 23rd through, I believe, Monday, February 6th. I need to double check the ticket. I may be in the office on Monday. So I will be in Panama. I understand, I'm assured by my husband that I'll have self-service and be able to check emails occasionally, but we shall see. AML Winter Legislative Conference, February 22nd through 24th. Travel packets were distributed. So if you're interested in going, please return those as soon as possible. I think airfare, especially some of the prime flights, do fill up, is my understanding. So get those back to us if you don't mind. Annual public official financial disclosure statements. You'll be getting emails from me. It's that time again. They are due to the clerk's office March 15th. Then we did, let's see, a couple meetings ago, I believe we had the IM in the packet with the budget calendar. That's since been revised, actually a couple different times. So the most updated information is online, and we did give the council hard copies. So look for that or call us if there's any question. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Madam Attorney.
No comment, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Velock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No comments tonight.
Councilmember Johnson.
Madam Mayor and Council, this past week I actually had a chance to meet with Engine 557. For those people who don't know what Engine 557 is, it's nearing completion, and Alaska will have one of the few working steam engines. That'll be, I think, a real boon to our tourist attraction. In order for them to really move forward and become operational, they have several needs that they're going to have met, and they're really going to be reaching out to us in the city for some minor contributions, and I'm just sort of giving you a warning here. In order to run a steam engine, it takes water. Significant amounts of water. So I don't exactly know what their needs are, what their timing is, but I would certainly like us to have an opportunity to listen to what their needs will be and to put that into our budget, because I think this would really give us another tourist attraction that would be very unique for the state of Alaska. Thank you.
Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, for talking about the 557. Those, anybody that hasn't had the opportunity to visit the restoration shop over there by, what's the name of the clothing company? All Seasons Clothing Company, should take the opportunity. I've been there several times, and it is just amazing what they have done with that. It's a World War II steam engine commissioned by the Army. I can't remember, 30, 39, 38, something like that. It was a long time ago, but I mean, it's almost to the point where it looks brand new, which is pretty amazing. So, and they, any weekend they can give you a tour, even if you just show up. It's better to arrange it, but if you just show up, they'd be happy to show you around and brag about their accomplishments there. So, first I either wanted to apologize to the council or to congratulate you on the Christmas present I gave you by being in an area where I did not have cell service for one of the meetings there. So it's not like me to to miss a meeting. I wish I had been here, but somehow I think the council might have different feelings about that.
Get out early.
Also, regarding Mr. Brown's discussion about the Constitution, I agree we should all certainly be familiar with the Constitution, but as we had Representative Eastman here earlier, who is probably more expert than most of us on the Alaska Constitution. I mean, he just came out of 3 weeks of court dealing with the Alaska Constitution, and he won in some cases and lost in others. So our knowledge of the Constitution is a great thing for us to talk about and have beers over and chat about, of course, in groups of 3 or less. But when it comes to if you really have a constitutional question, we do have Ms. Wells' law firm is at our disposal, and we can certainly ask her guidance on that. Also, for the chief, the weekly crime bulletin showing from December 26th to January 1st of 2023. I've been on the council a long time, and I can't remember 52 citations in a week, probably for a couple of years, I would think. Are we getting more citations because we're doing more traffic enforcement? Are we getting more citations because we're doing more shoplifting enforcement? Are we getting, or is this because we're finally getting our manning level up? And I also, see on the report here there was a pretty significant number of arrests compared to what we normally have. Could you maybe speak to that? Or was it just keep a cop busy week, or what was happening there with the criminals?
Well, we did have some extra bodies with the SROs being outside of school. One of them was able to contribute to that, which meant more activity, especially during the day shift and the heavier traffic. We didn't have any grants that we utilized. And then usually this time of the year that calls for service, I think if it serves me right, we responded to 536 calls for service. Is that correct?
For that particular week, it was 482, but 500 is about the.
Next week it was about 530. So I mean, it's typically a lot more calls for service that would generally lead to more arrests and more citations issued. But for grant purposes, we didn't have any special enforcement going out there. It was just a couple extra bodies out there just being proactive.
And speaking of grants, these are grants from the DOT. I'm guessing, from federal grants that the municipality of Anchorage uses rather liberally to do traffic enforcement on the Glen Highway. This summer, will we be in a manning position, do you think, where we can actually take advantage of some of that grant money to put our officers on overtime and get a little bit better handle on traffic traveling through our city? Or?
I'm optimistic. I mean, it's definitely a goal that we'd like to contribute, and that's kind of the steps that I'm taking to move forward with. Be a little bit more heavier in proactive enforcement in all general areas that's important with the increased population during the summer.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that we're getting back up on step with our manning there. So that's has been a huge concern of mine for several years. So congratulations on that. Also, for the clerk, AML will be having its board meeting before the meeting this time. So the board meeting will be on the 21st all day long. Usually the board meeting is on Friday afternoon, which means people avoid the board meeting like the plague, so they can get back out. But I know the mayor is now on the board as the ACOM president, Alaska Council of Mayors president, and I'm on the board as well. So if you could make a note of that, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No comments.
Councilmember Sullivan Leonard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to acknowledge Crystal Nygaard for all of her work with regard to economic development and the SEDS process. I'm thoroughly impressed and just really pleased with everything we're doing to move forward. You know, it's really interesting because, I mean, you can look at money and just say, we need a road paved. Well, there's more to it than that. How does that road enhance your business? Where is that road leading to? And so there's all sorts of definitive discussions there that I think will help our city as we move forward, and I think that's a real positive. And I did notice on the particular board too, we don't have anyone from the medical community. I see a lot of course, our contractors and Mr. Brown, thank you for serving. I think that's great. But do you need input from the medical community? Because it seems like certain areas of Wasilla are continuing to grow with med-surg type businesses.
Yeah, we'll take that under consideration. What we have found is that, we'll have 1 block and 5 dentists.
Yes. Yeah.
They are exempt from sales tax. So, we have to just be very clear when we strategically recruit commercial business that it's to the benefit of reinvesting back into infrastructure. So we will definitely
counter
consider
question then. So does it matter whether they are exempt from sales tax or not? Because they still live in Wasilla proper and provide a service for community members.
I think it does matter, and I will definitely let them, I'll talk to McKinley about that.
Okay, just
Thank you.
Just asking. Anyway, but again, thank you. I really appreciate that. Madam Mayor, just with regard to boards and commissions, thank you for getting open seats filled. It's really good to have new talent for the Planning Commission and others that know the ropes that provide quite a bit for Planning Commission, like Tim Burney, and Mary Champagne, who's been on for quite some time. Do we presently have any other openings for boards and commissions at this time?
We still have one opening on Parks and Rec. And it's got to be a city resident.
Okay, and then with regard to communications between mayors, I know the Matsuboro has openings on various boards and commissions. Do you have discussions with Mayor DeVries at all on that? And is she seeking folks from Wasilla for open spots that she might have? I mean, I'm just kind of throwing it out there, but I know Matsuboro occasionally will say, hey.
Sometimes she'll tell you that they have, usually at Chambers, when she tells you that they have openings for different boards and commissions and whatever, And of course, the state always has openings.
Absolutely. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
And thank you all for coming tonight. Holly, thank you for all your work. We appreciate you. And with that, with no further business to come before this council, we are adjourned at 8:22.